In 1897, the government of the United States held a living man in custody, not a criminal, not a prisoner of war, a giant, the last of Tartaria. And before he died, he told them something. I'm not looking for sensations. I study documents, archives, newspapers, official records, things that existed, things you can touch. And here's what I found. In the archives of the United States State Department for the year 1897, there is an entry, one paragraph, marked for official use only, about a subject held under medical observation at a facility in Virginia. The subject's height, 9 feet 2 inches. Age, estimated between 50 and 70 years. Reason for confinement, strategic interest in the subject's historical memory. Strategic interest in historical memory. Think about those words. Not medical interest, not scientific interest. Historical memory. What could this man have known that the government called strategic? And why, when he died in 1902, were all 7 people who worked with him transferred to other states within a single month? This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. And when I started pulling at that pattern, I found something that changes everything you think you know about the 19th century. In the 1880s, his name was Heinrich. At least, that's what they called him in the American documents. No one recorded his real name, or they recorded it and destroyed it. He appeared in New York in 1881, alone. No papers, no explanation. He spoke several languages, none of them English. And the one thing that united every witness account of the time, his height, 9 feet and taller. This was no circus performer. Circus performers want fame. They have names, posters, tour routes. He had nothing, only memory. In 1886, they took him. The official explanation, a medical examination. National Archives documents list him as research subject number 7. He spent 16 years in the facility. 16. Not as a prisoner. He had his own room. Not as a patient. He was never sick. He was there as a source of information. Every week, people came to him with notebooks, scientists, cartographers, architects, and they wrote things down. They wrote down a great deal. But not one of those records was ever published. Not one is kept in a public archive. Not one can be requested. Now look at the buildings, not at the facades, inside. The Virginia State Capitol, built in 1788. The working corridors inside have doors 14 feet high. 14. Not the grand entrance. A working corridor. A place where clerks walk with folders of paper. Why would a clerk need a door 14 feet high? Baltimore City Hall, 1815. Window sills at 7 feet from the floor. An ordinary person has to stand on their toes to look out the window. The St. Louis Archive, the 1840s. Staircases with risers 10 inches high. The standard is 7 inches, because that's comfortable for a human being. Who finds 10 inches comfortable? One of the men who worked with Heinrich wrote a letter, a private letter, to his sister, never meant for publication. It sat in a private collection for 120 years, until the family put the archive up for auction in 2019. In a letter dated the 14th of March, 1899, he wrote, "The subject spoke today of cities, not ruins, cities, living ones. He described them as if he had seen them yesterday. He named building materials I do not know. He spoke of a system of lighting without fire. I do not know what to do with what I am hearing. Professor Harris asked me not to write of it, even home, but I cannot keep it inside. Cities, living ones, not ruins, not legends, the memories of an eyewitness." He remembered Tartaria. He had lived in it, and he spoke of it every week to people the government paid to stay silent. Heinrich died in February 1902. Official cause of death, heart failure. He was supposedly around 60 years old. Here's what happened afterward. Dr. William Harris transferred to Louisiana, March 1902. Cartographer J. Evans, dismissed, April 1902. Assistant Archivist T. Collins, transferred to Texas, April 1902. 3 unnamed researchers in the documents, relieved of their posts, May 1902. The author of the letter, his name cut out of every document, literally cut out, with a knife. 7 people, 7 transfers, dismissals, disappearances in 3 months, right after the death of the last person who remembered. This is not the only case, it's the only documented one. In 1893 in Kansas, a similar subject of observation was recorded. Height, 8 feet 8 inches. Held in a private facility funded by the federal government. Died in 1897. All documents transferred to the Smithsonian Institution. The Smithsonian Institution says no such documents exist. In 1901, in Pennsylvania, a man named John Jenkins reported to the local sheriff about a huge man who was brought in by night to a rented barn and whom no one ever saw again. The sheriff wrote a report. The report exists in the 1901 case file, but the next page of the file is gone. Now the question arises, why all of this? Why hold a giant in custody for 16 years? Why pay scientists to listen to him? Why cover the tracks after his death? The answer is simple. They were building. Between 1880 and 1910, the United States erected more government buildings than in the previous 100 years combined. Courthouses, post offices, archives, administrative centers, all in the same architectural style, all with the same proportions that don't fit an ordinary human being. They were learning from him, copying what he described. And when he died, they no longer needed the source. They only needed no one to ask where the blueprint came from. There is one last document, not from a state archive, from the private diary of a nurse who worked at the facility. Her name was Martha Holloway. She kept a diary from 1895 to 1902. The diary is held in the library of the University of Virginia, in the private materials section. Access by special request only. An entry dated the 17th of January, 1902, 3 weeks before his death. Today he did not speak of architecture. He spoke of children. He said that every people who built what we call the old cities had children, and that the children live. He said it 3 times. The children live. I did not understand what he meant. This morning, Professor Harris took my diary away for 2 hours. He returned it without explanation. I cannot find yesterday's page. The children live. What does that mean? The giants did not vanish suddenly. They shrank, generation after generation, through mixed marriages, through adaptation, through survival. A scientific fact that official anthropology acknowledges. Between 1850 and 1920, the average height of the North American population fell by 3 inches, and then began to rise again. The explanation? Worsening nutrition during the industrial period. But 3 inches in a single generation. That's a lot. A great deal. But what if nutrition has nothing to do with it? What if it wasn't degradation, but integration? What if the children of Tartaria simply became us? Think about it. If you look in the mirror and see something in yourself, something you can't explain, something that feels too ancient, too enduring, too much like a memory you don't have, perhaps that's it, the memory of Tartaria, the one they couldn't take from you. Here's what we know for certain. First, a man 9 feet tall was held in a United States government facility. This is on record. Second, the people who worked with him were quickly and deliberately scattered. This is on record. Third, buildings constructed in that period have proportions that don't match the human norm. This can be measured right now. Fourth, Tartaria disappears from the maps in exactly the period when everything else happens, the years 1840 to 1860. This is a historical fact. Each of these facts on its own is an anomaly. Together, it's a system. The last giant of Tartaria died in 1902 in a nameless room, surrounded by people paid not to remember his name. But he managed to speak, and some of it survived to reach us, in an archival note, in a private letter, in the pages of a woman's diary from which someone tore a single leaf. History does not vanish completely. It hides. It waits for someone to ask the right question. If you want to know more about what exactly he told them of Tartaria's architecture, about what is hidden in the buildings you walk past every day. The next video